The rise and fall of Skil, the company that invented the circular saw and forgot how to build one. It's 1921, and a man is standing in a sugarcane field in Louisiana, watching workers swing machetes under the brutal southern sun. The cane is thick, the heat is relentless, and the labor is exhausting. That man is Edmond Michel, and he's convinced there has to be a better way. Michel was an inventor at heart, a tinkerer who believed every hard problem had a mechanical solution waiting to be found. So he went to work. After years of experimentation, he developed what he called an electric handsaw, a motorized cutting tool that could be carried and operated by a single person. It was rough and early, but the concept was genuinely revolutionary. By 1923, the prototype was real enough to attract attention. A farmland developer named Joseph W. Sullivan saw the potential immediately, not just for cutting cane, but for construction, woodworking, and industry at large. The two men partnered up, refined the design, and in 1924 formally established the Michel Electric Handsaw Company. Their creation was given a name that would eventually become one of the most recognized words in the entire tool industry, the Skilsaw. Almost immediately, the tool made waves. Early prototypes were tested on construction sites in California, where contractors were stunned by a simple but powerful idea. Instead of bringing the lumber to the saw, you could bring the saw to the lumber. That concept alone changed how job sites operated. Workers who had spent years hauling heavy timber across yards to reach stationary blades suddenly had cutting power in their hands. The productivity gains were enormous. But as often happens with inventors, Michel grew restless. He hadn't started a company because he wanted to run a company. He started it because he wanted to build things. By 1926, he had handed over control and walked away to pursue other inventions. The firm was renamed Skilsaw Incorporated, and production was ramping up. By the end of that year alone, over 2,000 circular saws had rolled off the line. The same year the company got its new name, it introduced a critical manufacturing innovation: die-cast aluminum housings. Up until that point, metal tools were heavy and expensive to produce. Aluminum allowed Skilsaw to make tools that were both lighter and more durable at the same time. It was a competitive advantage that helped cement the brand's early dominance. Then, in 1928, came a challenge. A rival inventor named Art Emmons, working on behalf of Porter Cable, designed a new style of circular saw specifically to get around Skilsaw's worm drive patents. Where Skilsaw's design sent power through a worm gear arrangement, powerful and precise but heavier, Emmons' version used a direct sidewinder motor. The blade sat on the side, the tool was lighter, and it didn't infringe on any existing patents. Just like that, there were two competing philosophies of circular saw design on the market. Contractors on the West Coast, who often worked on lighter-framed wood construction, loved the worm drive. Contractors on the East Coast gravitated toward the sidewinder. That regional divide exists to this day. Skilsaw, undeterred, doubled down on its original design. In 1934, the company expanded beyond saws for the first time, introducing electric drills. In 1936, it did something genuinely progressive for its era. It established an insurance and pension program for its employees, at a time when such benefits were almost unheard of in American manufacturing. But the single most important moment in the company's product history came in 1937, with the release of the Model 77. The Model 77 was everything a professional tradesman wanted in a saw. It was tough, reliable, balanced, and built to last through years of abuse on a construction site. It ran on a worm drive and used a blade configuration that felt natural in the hand. Contractors across the country called it the best portable electric saw they had ever used. Within a few years, it became the industry standard, not just a product, but a benchmark. If you wanted to know whether a circular saw was good, you compared it to the Model 77. Decades passed, and the tool barely changed. That wasn't a failure of imagination, it was proof of how right the original design was. The Model 77 is still in production today, nearly 90 years after it was first introduced, and it's still considered one of the finest worm drive saws ever made. Through the 1940s and 1950s, the company grew steadily. The post-war construction boom was enormous, and every new suburb being built across America needed lumber cut. The Skilsaw name was on job sites from coast to coast. The brand became so synonymous with circular saws that people began using the word Skilsaw the same way they used Band-Aid or Kleenex, as a generic term for any handheld circular saw, regardless of who made it. That's a rare and powerful kind of cultural penetration for any brand to achieve. In 1952, the company updated its name once more, dropping Incorporated and becoming Skil Corporation. It broadened its product range throughout the decade, and by 1960, the company began expanding into Europe. By the 1980s, Skil had a presence in South America and Asia Pacific as well. It produced its 10 millionth power tool in 1966, a milestone that spoke to both the brand's scale and its longevity. But here's where the story starts to get complicated. In January of 1979, Emerson Electric, a large industrial conglomerate, agreed to purchase a majority stake in Skil Corporation for around $58 million. The deal was not without friction. The U.S. Department of Justice filed a complaint, citing concerns about competition in the power tools market. A federal judge ultimately allowed the acquisition to go forward, but only on the condition that Skil divest its chainsaw business and certain other overlapping assets. Under Emerson's ownership, Skil continued to develop. The late 1970s saw the company redesign many of its tools with heavy-duty plastic housings, making them lighter and better insulated. In 1982, Emerson announced an ambitious goal. Skil would become the most successful power tool company in America. The company invested heavily in manufacturing and quality control systems to back that claim. By 1988, management believed they had achieved it. But the clock was already ticking on another major ownership change. In 1991, Emerson Electric and the German engineering giant Robert Bosch, GmbH, announced they would combine their respective power tool subsidiaries into a joint venture. The new entity was called SB Power Tool Company. For 4 years, the two corporations shared ownership. Then, in 1996, Bosch bought out Emerson's stake entirely and took full control of Skil, and this is where many industry observers argue the real decline began.
Bosch is one of the most successful engineering companies in the world, but it had its own professional tool brand, Bosch itself, that it was already investing in aggressively. Owning Skil created an awkward internal competition. Bosch needed Skil to occupy a different shelf in the store, so the brand was gradually repositioned. Over time, Skil drifted away from the professional construction market and toward the DIY consumer space. The tools became less expensive. The quality, according to many tradesmen who had used the brand for decades, began to slip. For a company that had built its reputation on tools that lasted a career, that shift in identity was damaging. Contractors who had sworn by the Model 77 for 30 years didn't suddenly need a new brand. They needed the same saw, made to the same standard. When Skil stopped being that brand, they found other options. DeWalt, Milwaukee, Makita, competitors who were building their reputations on the professional trust that Skil was quietly walking away from. By the early 2010s, it was clear the brand needed a course correction. In 2014, Bosch made a structural decision. It would split the Skil identity into two. The professional-grade tools, primarily the worm drive saws, would be sold under the revived Skilsaw name, positioned explicitly for contractors and tradespeople. The consumer-grade, DIY-oriented tools would remain under the Skil name. The idea was to stop trying to be two things at once. It was a reasonable strategy, but it may have come too late to matter under Bosch's stewardship. In August of 2016, Bosch announced it had reached an agreement to sell the Skil brand, both the professional Skilsaw line and the consumer Skil line, to Chervon, HK Limited, a power tool manufacturer based in Nanjing, China. The deal covered North America and Europe, with the rest of the global market to follow. Chervon was not a well-known name to most tool buyers, but the company had real depth. Founded in 1993, it had been quietly building power tools for major American brands for years, including some Craftsman cordless lines. It also owned Ego, a battery-powered outdoor equipment brand that had earned strong reviews. Chervon knew how to make tools. What it was acquiring with Skil was something harder to manufacture: history, heritage, and a name that still meant something. In 2018, Chervon relaunched the Skil brand with a new visual identity and a new lineup of 12-volt and 20-volt cordless tools. The goal was clear: make Skil relevant again to the homeowner who wanted quality without professional-grade prices. The brand today sits in that space, more capable than the cheapest tools at the hardware store, but priced below the premium professional lines. Whether that's the right place for a brand that once defined what a circular saw was supposed to be is a question without an easy answer. The Skilsaw Model 77 is still being made. It still turns up on job sites. Old-timers still call it the best worm drive saw on the market. There's something almost poignant about that. A nearly 90-year-old design, essentially unchanged, still earning its keep while the company that created it has changed hands 4 times and lost and partially found its identity more than once. Edmond Michel stood in a Louisiana field in 1921 and imagined a better way to cut through something difficult. He couldn't have imagined that the tool he invented would become so essential that its name would pass into everyday language. And he definitely couldn't have imagined that a century later, the company built around that invention would be owned by a Chinese conglomerate, selling budget cordless drills to weekend warriors in suburban garages. That's the strange arc of American manufacturing legacy. You can invent something that changes the world and still lose the plot of what made it matter. The Skilsaw built America. Whether anything being made under that name today is building its legacy back, that remains to be seen.